Before the armies collided, the battlefield was silent. As it descended, the greatest armies came into view. Beneath its wings stood a young king. Darius had the larger army. He had the battlefield he wanted. He had cavalry, infantry, and deadly chariots. So why did his army collapse? The answer began with one mistake Alexander was waiting for.
Imagine commanding the greatest empire on earth and suddenly seeing an enemy king charging directly toward you. At Gaugamela, Darius saw Alexander coming. What happened next changed history forever.
Alexander was massively outnumbered. Across the plains stood an army built to crush him. But before the sun disappeared, the greatest empire suffered a devastating blow. How did one young king do it?
His name was Alexander. He was barely 30 years old, but he had already become a legend. At its center sat Darius III, King of Kings and ruler of Persia. More than 2,000 years ago, one empire ruled a vast portion of the known world. But from the west came a young king who refused to accept Persian supremacy. His name was Alexander. He was barely 30 years old, but he had already become a legend. Alexander did not cross Asia simply to win battles. He intended to break Persian power completely. Darius knew that another defeat could threaten the survival of his dynasty. Both kings began moving toward the same destination, a vast plain near Gaugamela. Darius had chosen the battlefield carefully, preparing the open ground for his cavalry and war chariots. On paper, the battlefield seemed almost perfect for destroying Alexander.
Ancient writers give wildly different numbers, but one fact is clear: Darius possessed the larger army.
On the evening before the battle, Alexander finally saw the Persian army. From the darkness came thousands of fires, making the Persian army appear endless. But Alexander's soldiers did not panic. Their commander had prepared them for this moment.
We must strike them now under the cover of darkness. His commanders wanted to attack immediately. I will not steal my victory, Alexander refused.
He would spend the night studying the enemy, rather than gambling his army in darkness.
Then the darkness slowly disappeared, and the battlefield emerged beneath the morning sun.
Darius placed his forces across a massive front, hoping his numbers would overwhelm Alexander.
Alexander answered with the formation that had conquered armies from Greece to Egypt. Thousands of disciplined soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, turning individual men into one fighting machine. And on Alexander's right waited the weapon he trusted most, his elite companion cavalry.
The battlefield became silent for a moment.
Then Alexander began moving. But he did not charge straight toward Darius. He deliberately moved toward his right, drawing the Persian cavalry with him. It was a dangerous maneuver.
If Alexander moved too far, the Persian army could surround him.
But Alexander was not trying to escape.
He was searching for something.
Target their center!
A weakness in the Persian line. And slowly, the Persian formation began to open. While the Persian army prepared for battle, Alexander's soldiers rested. Morning arrived slowly. And with the sunrise came the armies.
Gaugamela was ready.
Persian soldiers filled the horizon. Banners moved above the formations like a sea of color.
Darius positioned himself near the center. Alexander positioned himself on the right. For several moments, neither army moved. Then Alexander gave the order.
The Macedonian army began advancing.
Persian cavalry moved to meet them.
The battlefield suddenly exploded into motion.
And Alexander began the maneuver that would change history.
They said Alexander was marching toward an army so enormous that victory should have been impossible.
Alexander didn't attack the Persian army head-on. Instead, he deliberately moved away. It looked dangerous. To Alexander, it was a trap, and the Persians were walking straight into it. For hours, thousands of soldiers fought across a dusty plain. Chariots thundered forward, cavalry smashed into infantry, and somewhere inside the chaos, Alexander found the open. He was barely 30 years old. His enemy ruled an empire, stretching across continents. Alexander stood as the most powerful man in Asia. Before Alexander marched toward another victory, a great eagle appeared above his army, soaring silently through the morning sky.